Hello, I'm Troy,
I'm Mike.
and welcome to Upon Further Review. This is our very first attempted podcast. Mike and I have been friends since high school, since 10th grade. So we're going back, 17 years?
Met the big and tall.
Met at the big and tall. We are both gigantic black men, graduates of historically black colleges, and we are nice middle-class professionals here to give our opinions on the times. And on the day of our very first podcast, we definitely got some nice, relevant news here from Vice President Joe Biden. Obviously, he's the presumptive Democratic nominee. And today, in an interview with Charlamagne the God on The Breakfast Club, he made a comment while being asked about his stances on black positions. Charlamagne told him that, hey, when you're up in New York, we have more questions for you. And Joe Biden asks, you got more questions? Well, I'll tell you what, and I quote, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Charlamagne responded, it don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact that I want something for my community. And he's take a look at my record, man. Biden shot back as their interview came to a rather weird end. Man, that is a doozy. And for me personally, it really highlights what some feel, I know I feel it from time to time, how the black vote is taken for granted by the Democratic Party, by the Democratic establishment, by white liberals. I feel as though they expect our vote and are not willing to put in the work and sometimes even show the respect to earn it.
I mean, when I first heard that, I was like, wow. White people just can't get their heads around what it means to be black in America, and B, what it is as a people that we actually want to achieve. And like you're right, the Democratic Party definitely takes the black vote for granted. If you really sit back and think about, all of the Democratic presidents that's been in office in the past, 30 years, there hasn't been a lot that's actual policy, not talking about rhetoric, but actual policy that has been put into place from the executive office to further, minorities in general, but, in specific, we're talking here for the black community. And, after a while, I think black people will eventually wake up and realize that they're just taking us for granted, taking our vote for granted. And not until we actually mobilize together, what we actually, and use our vote for what it means. Because right now, they just, they kind of have it in their back pocket, but actually exercising our right and using our vote and flexing our muscle might start on the lower level, putting people we want into place versus people that the, Democratic Party at headquarters wants in place. It's a tough topic, man, because it's so many layers to it. But once again, you just hear, and kind of the thing with Joe Biden, he's a little out of touch. He's from that old, yeah. He's from that yester generation. Ain't nothing wrong with that generation, but you can tell in times like these, he's a little out of touch with some of his comments that he makes.
And even keeping in mind Joe Biden being the vice president, what he brought to Barack Obama's ticket is that he was the conservative-minded, quote-unquote, white middle class, reach out to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and these, Rust Belt towns. He has always been closer to the center, if not right, as a Democrat, and that's one of the things he got attacked on in his voting record. Things like Kamala Harris bringing up his opposition to busing, forced busing, and things of that nature. And when it comes to policy, people are quick to point out policies that may have benefited by secondhand nature African Americans. They'll say, well, doing this impacts us because we're the majority, impact. But at the same time, we're talking about direct, we're coming for you. When we talk about a Hispanic community and we talk about immigration, yes, which impacts other people, but that is directly targeted at Hispanics, where you could in immigration and things of that nature. When we're talking about LGBT rights, we're not talking about things that impact everybody. We're targeted your voting block and doing this to deliver votes from your base. And I find it funny. Why is it that black people always, especially in the last election, this one, it's always our vote that we have questions about, and it's our vote that when we ask legitimate questions as to what you'll do to earn it, we get these kind of responses, because that's what alarmed me the most. Charlemagne said, we have more questions for you. Come see us again in New York. And the conversation should have ended there. But Joe Biden turns around and shoots back with almost disdain and disgust. Like, you got more questions? Like, what more do I need to give to you? You're not going to vote for Trump. You're going to vote for me. Otherwise, you ain't black. And he's saying that to a black man on his radio station. Like, that's...
And I got to get credit for Charlemagne, because he could have dug into that ass as soon as Biden said that. And I thought he was going to go there, but he showed him a little bit of respect. He showed a little bit of tact and kind of held back. But you can say he also didn't placate to, like, start tap dancing just because that's Joe Biden. And a lot of respect to him for how he handled that. But like you said, it's just I was even thinking about this, and not to segue too far away, but even think about the proposed changes to the Rooney Rule in NFL, where they're saying that if you hire a black GM or a black head coach, you'll get extra draft compensation. And that was insulting. Like, I don't think they realize that African Americans, people of African descent, don't want a handout. We want a fair playing field. You want to be, if I put my resume in the pile, I know that I'm going to get the same sort of evaluation as I would my counterpart who doesn't have the same hue as me, right? It's not saying that I want you to just give me this because I'm black. I do want to earn it. And I realized that through politics, politics, whoever, when you have white people trying to make rules and policies to help black people without the black insight, because they're not black, they haven't lived this, they haven't experienced this, they can't even wrap their heads around it. They always end up coming short, they end up messing up, and they end up falling flat on their face. And I was like, when are they going to empower people of African descent to actually make these rules and enact new laws and proposals that come from us, not the other way around?
And Biden really encapsulates the problem, because here's a black man talking to him. He sat down to do his interview. He's trying to tell you what he wants. In response to that comment, Biden said it doesn't have anything to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact that I want something for my community. His only response was, take a look at my record, man. Dismissing. For a lot of people have the problem, just listen. We don't want the tokenism. We don't need it. I need you to listen to what I'm saying without you thinking that you know what's best. And the idea that Joe Biden can say, just look at my record. Let me know what years to start counting that one, champ. Because you've been in the Senate since the 70s. So we took taking your record in the early 70s to mid-late 70s, early 80s. I'm sorry, is that too soon? Because we can take a look at your record. It's not pretty. How about the 90s? How about your support of criminalization, doing more to incarcerate more African Americans and spearheading through the Senate? Is that a part of your record that we're revealing? So when we're looking at 2020 and the 2020 election, and for you to dismiss these concerns and basically throw out that if you're black, vote for me, that is the heart of what the issues that a lot of African Americans have when it comes to candidates like this.
You know what? And unfortunately, this is, like I said, it's a symptom of, I think, issues in the Democratic Party as a whole. I can even harken back to when I remember, and I was talking to my wife about this, when he said that he was going to pick a woman to be the VP.
Woman of color.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. Instead of the better way to go about that is, because I felt that's it's like almost like, hey, look at Uncle Joe, I'm giving y'all a handout, right? Instead of going about that, he could have said that, he could have internally with his team said, I would really like to pick a woman of color, yada, 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 so let's do a comprehensive search, whatever. But externally, the better response declaration would have been, hey, we're going to make sure for my VP search, we're going to evaluate a wide variety of candidates from different backgrounds, different parts, coming from different parts of life. I'm not just going to kind of be cookie cutter. I'm going to make sure it's a diverse set of candidates, because I want to, make sure that every viewpoint of my constituency actually has a voice. But when you just come out and say, hey, I'm gonna give it to a black woman. Look at me, right? You know, it's almost self-serving. Yeah,
it's tokenism.
Yeah.
The sole purpose of saying that I'm going to choose a woman of color candidate, that's all he wants to have to do to shore up the black vote. Him saying that, mind you, we don't even know if he's going to do it. There is rumors that have come out from credible sources that he's also vetting people like Amy Klobuchar, another prosecutor. You know, but simply we have to start making decisions. Is it policy that we are willing to work towards, or the tokenism of it? Both can happen, but we have no reason to believe that a man who's as old as Joe, somebody who's been around in the Senate and held power as long as Joe, who was brought to prominence by Barack Obama, because he was the conservative, moderate, white Democrat to quell the fears of Barack Obama and his radical, quote-unquote, left wing, because that's how some people would view it within the party, because you have to have that coalition that is broad-spanning to shore that base up to win the election in such a landslide as Barack Obama did twice. But that's what Joe brought to the table, was conservative, moderate, white Democrat liberalism. And here he is again. Now he's the president. He could be the president. But who's going to hold him to account? Picking Stacey Abrams, picking a Kamala Harris, picking a Val Demings, and sticking them in the vice presidential seat so that once he gets in office, we'll see. We've seen this a million times as African Americans over the course of the last 50 years.
It's like saying, hey, we give you a little bit. Look at this little crumb we gave you. Oh, wow, it's really delicious, huh? That's going to be whoever his VP is. Look what I did. And that should be enough. That should be your policy right there. That should be your changes. That should be your modifications to the justice system, to police brutality. It's all encompassed because, look, that's all cool, but look what I did. I gave you your first female black VP. And he's kind of holding that. That's to me like saying, like, I work for, Microsoft, and I'm a regular employee there, and I get a company memo saying, hey, the CFO position opened up, and we're going to pick an Hispanic. Like, what kind of shit was that? I would be, if I was, I would kind of feel like, you're just going to pick an Hispanic. You should choose based on merits. I would like to see, he's saying that I'm going to choose from a diverse candidate pool. That's really what I want, like, once again, it goes to the handout versus hand up.
Yeah. That's like somebody doing something nice for homeless people, but you got the cameras out and you're recording it. Like, even if you are picking somebody who's very well qualified based on their merit, you're still doing it with the cameras out with an intention and a purpose. And it's not a matter of just simply picking a woman of color. I bet you if they picked Condoleezza Rice out there, it wouldn't have the impact that people have. Why? Because she's a Republican working in a Republican Bush administration. I bet you if Candace Owens, even though unqualified, or someone who held those viewpoints, Congresswoman Mia Hamm of Utah, Republican black woman, I bet you if you chose her, that we wouldn't be getting the same impact. It's clear why he made that comment. And he reveals almost a Freudian slip into his thinking when he makes statements like this on national television or national radio broadcast.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be kind of telling. I think a lot of people think his candidacy for the president, his run for the presidency is going to be a bit of a layup. And I'm sorry, he keeps having these little gaffes, Trump is going to take advantage because here's the thing. Trump plays by no rules and Biden still plays by rules. And you can't have these kind of slip-ups because guess what? Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care if it's shady or unethical to go after you about something. He's going to put it right out there and he's going to do it on a national debate stage, right? And then he's going to tweet about it nonstop. Right.
And he's absolutely going to bait these kind of responses out of Joe Biden. And we hear what Joe Biden sounds like when he goes off the cuff. It sounds like the comment that was made today. It's not pretty.
So they got to be careful on, well, it says something if you have to be that careful with a candidate because this candidate.
Oh, absolutely. That's his history. You have to be very careful with the things he says. He goes off the cuff. He's just smart enough to mute it and limit it in a way that Trump basically does not care. He'll say whatever he's thinking, however he's in whatever setting, middle of the Rose Garden. He don't care. He's giving you a piece of his mind. And when a piece of Biden's mind slips out, it sounds like what we heard here. It sounds like that ridiculous story he told about working as a lifeguard, and they used to come up and brush the strokes of his hair, and I learned about roaches that day. It's like, what are you talking about, Joe? You're rambling, man. And we already have begun to see the seeds of people using the rambling Joe, the quote unquote senile Joe, against him when he makes these ridiculous comments that less than 24 hours you got to basically walk back.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to the end of the day, he issued a statement, but his team was his team was on it the moment he said it in that room. They was like, oh fuck, we have to put out some kind of statement. We got to start kind of backtracking this a little bit, because they knew in the moment that it came out. He probably didn't realize in the moment, but they knew in the moment that he had fucked up, right? So they're going to put this on, but it's going to be interesting to watch to see, once again when how this continues to go down the road. We know that the debate formats might not be the same, or it might not. How it plays out with all the COVID-19 things going on, but it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to continue to play out. If he's going to continue to have these kind of lapse in judgment when it comes to his speaking engagements, and that will sway votes. I mean, it really will. So it'll be interesting to watch.
And by the way, I sit on the stand, and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn turn. Blonde in the sun, and the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap, and I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
So we just went through that clip that I was referring to earlier of Joe Biden, who was working at the time as a lifeguard at the pool, and holy smokes, man. That is just, wow.
That is a layup. And when I say layup, I don't mean a layup on an NBA regulation court. I mean a layup on a Fisher-Price court with a tennis ball. Come on, man. Like, what train of thought led you to say the things you said in the manner you said? And I'm kind of...
That's going to be Exhibit A in the case of senile old Joe, that they're going to start playing those sorts of comments. And it's like, wow. And that actually kind of segues me to an adjacent topic. Donald Trump made the great statement, you could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and they'd still, come out and support him. I really think that it is the expectation of the establishment of the Democratic National Committee that no matter what they do and no matter what candidate they put forth, black people are going to come and support without the policy, without the positions, without even the personnel. You are going to vote for us because what else are you going to vote for? And that's what Joe Biden spit out today on Charlamagne the God's radio show.
And you know whose fault that is? Ours. And you know why? It's because we have been kind of going out in droves and supporting Democratic candidates blindly. I mean, it's really sad. And that kind of, I really wish there was a three-party system, because I feel like you got people all the way on the left, you got people all the way over here on the right, and then you got people that are more shades of gray in the middle. They can see points from both sides. They might be leaning more one way or the other, but they're closer to the middle. They're more sensible people. They're saying that, you know what? This is not an ideal situation. I hear what you're saying all the way over here. I hear what you're saying all the way over there. Let's find some kind of middle ground and move on. Let's not just, let this thing just hang like a fart in the wind, blow around everywhere, sticking up the place. You got more sensible people out there without a place to go. And they're stuck having to choose, from the far right or the far left. And there's no sensible middle ground candidate or party to really post a candidate to kind of appeal to these people. And I feel like a large amount of, African Americans, do feel this way. It's like, I don't believe everything they say, but, I'm definitely not rocking what they say, what they're doing over there. And you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
They use fear as the primary motivator. The idea that, you're all going to die and then everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket if you do not vote our way. What choice do you have? We don't have to offer you anything. We don't have to give you anything. You have no choice because you must vote for me. Back in 2016, Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, and I remember when he was a CNN commentator during the 2016 election, he supported the Green Party, and he made a statement about not being afraid of Trump, and we can't afford to lose an election. We can't afford. We can afford to lose an election, but we cannot afford to lose our values. And he was all about pulling the positions out of the Democratic Party by force and being willing to withhold our vote if necessary.
I have very little trust in what the Democratic Party is doing, and I worry that we're investing so much faith in them out of fear. I mean, Republicans always talk about terrorism, but Democrats are playing on a certain kind of terrorism too. They're essentially saying, if you don't vote for us, you're going to have Donald Trump and your life is going to be ruined.
Right.
And I'm saying that if you frame that as the choice, then you never get to demand what you actually deserve and what you actually
You're just
want.
picking the lesser of two evils.
Exactly.
Do you
Let's
like
not
Hillary?
choose evil.
Do you like Hillary from what you've seen?
I wouldn't vote for her. I'm voting for the Green Party.
And Joe Biden, it was all good and sweet when he was Uncle Joe, supporting, Vice President to Barack Obama and didn't say a word, even though obviously Barack Obama elevated him to the highest office he's ever held to this point. That's why I refer to him as Vice President Biden. He's tried 3 times to run for president, and finally now, after that blessing from Barack Obama, he's getting this push. But Mark Lamont Hill and the Green Party, and me personally, I find myself supporting libertarians a lot, as depending on the topic. And that's another thing. That segues into a whole other topic. But the idea of us only having this 2-party system, and it forces us into these devil's choices, these devil's advocate choices. Because not to bring up, we had a lot of hoopla about, Brett Kavanaugh and the accusations that he had against him. Donald Trump grab her by the, that when those things came down, and we talked about having a president with this, that, and the third, and we saw the left, we saw Democrats rail against these ideas, but now we have a Joe Biden who has a credible accusation from Tara Reid, and I have to sit here and read on sites like Jezebel, a supposedly feminist website, that basically this is a shit sandwich they're willing to eat. Because you got to choose between one person accused of this and another person accused, and maybe this one has more and this one has less. And we've seen some of the behavior of Joe Biden in public that he's had to apologize for. We have seen it. It's on tape. It's unacceptable. Him being handsy with women. Him, people are pulling away and he's pulling them back, and he's sniffing the napes of their neck and hair. And just textbook creepiest way possible. The memes write themselves in today's day and age. And it begs the question, Trump said it, my supporters, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. Is there anything that Democrats can do to lose that black vote as well? Are we in that same category with them?
With Donald Trump as president, I say yes. I mean, you're, at this point, it's almost asking people to choose between Hitler and the devil, right? I'm not going to go say as far as Joe Biden's that bad, but what I'm trying to say is there's no other really good alternative that we as black people can actually turn to, or really minorities in general. I really think that we also should start looking at each other, trying to uplift each other, people of black and brown communities especially, because we go through the same things. And I really think that not just the Republican Party and not just the Democratic Party too would be scared shitless if we actually kind of united and got behind each other, because we face a lot of the same issues, with poverty, zoning issues of schools and things of that nature, access to affordable health care, just trying to get, decent wages, trying to get decent quality education for our kids. We fall in line in so many areas that if we kind of were to unite the two of us, that is a movement that would be hard to stop. And we could sway no matter what party, to our direction, because we would be a powerful unified vote. And I think until something, along those lines happens, until we essentially hold our votes hostage and together, then we could actually start making waves. But I just don't see, it's hard for that to happen. It's hard I remember actually a little back in the day, I believe it was Marcus Garvey. He had the idea of uniting poor whites with African Americans, because he was like, look, to be honest, they treat you like shit too, and they treat us like shit, obviously, and they have you thinking that you're better than us. But guess what? You live in the same damn. We call it a ghetto. You call it a trailer park. But we're both living in poverty. Let's come together. Let's unite and figure this thing out.
In order for that to work, though, we absolutely would have to be willing to withhold our votes, willing to make that stand, and that would be willing to allow another 4 years of Donald Trump. That's what you would have to risk. It's kind of like negotiating for that big contract, right? It's what happened with Dak Prescott. Hey, you willing to play on that franchise tag? And, you can get hurt, things can work, but are you willing to stand on that principle to fight for that long money? And until we're willing to do that, until we're willing to either vote for a third party, even though it's the likelihood that they'll lose, but seeing those numbers of the third party rise, whether it's Green Party, Libertarian Party, what it may be, because I really don't support nat voting for all, although that is, the right to vote. I think you should pick a candidate, but nat voting is also using your voice in the way that you see fit. I think spending that vote on those third parties, so at least you can see, wow, last election they had 4% of the vote. Now they're at 8% of the vote, and what have you. Allowing that to grow and seeing that people are looking for an alternative, because at the end of the day, both sides, if they want to win elections and they want to have a greater advantage, must reach out to those other sides. And we have to be willing to basically play chicken, because another 4 years of Donald Trump is not going to literally be the death of me as a black man. It's not. They said 1 year was going to do it, then 2, then 3, then 4. We're 4 years later. The man's been president for a full first term, and here we still are. And that hyperbole and fear is what's used to motivate our vote. And I think it's telling that must be broken out to use as a motivator. We didn't have this problem when Barack Obama was running. We didn't have to, we didn't need to use threats and, oh man, if John McCain, because it takes office, it was unnecessary, because he was a phenomenal candidate who had a phenomenal campaign.
Yeah, and I remember back when Obama first ran, usually for me, I'm more of an independent. I vote for who I feel is the best candidate at all times. I can't vote just to go along with a party if I don't believe the best person is not in the job, in the position to do the best job for what they're elected for. That being said, Obama's first term, I definitely voted for him because he was black. That's point blank, period. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how you can get around that.
That was my first presidential election.
That was my first presidential election, too. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That was a historic moment. I think that's very significant for people who, not just people coming up and growing up today, but for people who never thought that they would see it. Like my wife's grandmother, my grandmother, both over 90 years old. And to think that they could never fathom to see an African American sitting in the Oval Office is quite mind-blowing to me. They thought it would never, ever happen. So for those things, I was like, I had to vote for him. And also, I thought he was a great communicator. I thought he had solid ideas. The whole 9 yards. I thought he was just a great candidate. Going into the next term, I thought he was the better person, better candidate. So I voted for him again, right? And now I find myself that, going in, I was like, okay, I got to, for the last presidential election, I wasn't rocking with Hillary. And I definitely wasn't rocking with Trump. So I had to do a write-in. I wrote in the name. I can't remember. I wrote in the candidate I thought at the time. I was like, they should have got a nomination somewhere. And I wrote them in. But I think after a while, I realized, I'm not going to just vote just to appease, who I'm supposed to vote, right? I'm putting up air quotes right now. I'm not just going to fall in line with the rest of the sheeple because that's what we're supposed to do because we're black, right? We got to start using our power, man. Once we unite, the scariest thing that they can see is, people of color uniting for a common cause, And I don't know if this means uniting as in, hey, we did a march or anything like that. I'm talking about uniting at the ballot, going to vote and vote not in just the presidential elections, but your local and your state elections too, for your congressional seats. You got to let them know, hey, if you want my vote, I better see some stuff done that affects me, my family, and my community. Because so far, I don't see anything changing. I see the same old, and you're not just going to continue to get it without at least coming to the table with some actual concrete ideas and proposals that I see you trying to do, on the Senate floor, on the House floor, or in the office of the president.
I definitely cast my vote in 2016 for the Green Party, for Jill Stein and Barack Obama. I believe that, and I was in Maryland at the time, and definitely wanted that pull on the Democratic Party because my state was going blue, no matter how you sliced it. Looking at the results of the 2016 presidential election, we make a lot of hoopla about the popular vote. Lost the popular votes, 3 million, roughly a 3 million vote difference in that popular vote count. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, got 4.5 million votes. That was 3.28% of the national election. Jill Stein got 1.5 million votes. That was only 1%, just a little bit over. And there was an additional million votes that was cast for the top 4 candidates. That's, so right then and there, we are at 7 million people voting for someone other than the Democrat or the Republican, when the percentage points won by Hillary Clinton with the popular vote was 48 to Donald Trump's 46%. Not even 2 full percentage points when you get into the numbers of it. And and it's amazing to me that people don't reach out to those third parties. I hope those numbers get bigger. Justin Amash just announced that he's going to consider running for president as a Libertarian candidate. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, if you don't vote for this, then you're also voting for Trump. And if you don't vote you don't vote, you're voting for Trump. If you vote for a third party, you're voting for Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." I can tell you right here now, here in the great state of Texas, this state's going red in the Electoral College. But the question is, at what point will candidates begin reaching out to those third parties and modifying their stances and modifying and respecting those things? Because it's interesting. Beto O'Rourke barely lost the Senate. He got beat, but he came a lot closer to winning a Senate seat than everyone thought. But the fact that the parties force one shade of blue, now there's no navy, light blue, baby blue, North Carolina blue. You have one shade that you must paint all your policies in, and I think it really hurts them. It absolutely hurts the Democratic Party, and it pushes people away. It pushes people who find out, what do I do if I do support the Second Amendment and gun rights, but here we are, everything else I vote Democrat. There was a controversy in the past about Bernie Sanders supporting people who were pro-life Democrats. It's like, no, can't support them. There's no room in this party for them at all. And if they keep this up, and that extremism also exists on the right side of the aisle. We make fun of them, but Susan Collins and people like that, you make fun of them because it's like, oh, you end up voting for your party anyways, because at the end of the day, you got to make a choice. Are you choosing your party, which is also choosing your career, by the way, when you are the politician? You want to get reelected. That's what you're ultimately fighting for. But the idea that we're becoming more and more extreme and more polarized on both sides is leaving a vast gulf in the middle where people who have conflicting ideologies, is why I consider myself independent. Depends on what we're talking about. I want my taxes low. I like my guns. And I also believe in a strong safety net and people minding their damn business. I always find that I love the hypocrisy on both sides. You have conservative candidates that are all about a small government, all about, the government doesn't have the right to do this until it's trampling on some minorities' rights. They got no problems with those cops cracking heads on the corner. They don't look at that as government overreach. The hypocrisy is amazing on both sides, and the polarization is only making a political climate worse. And I think those numbers in 2020, you're going to see, what was that, about 7 million people in that vote, and that's probably going to look like 10. I think it's going to get worse. And the only thing they have to fight back against people voting for third party or not at all is fear. Telling you how horrible it's going to be if you don't go their way.
And I think another unintended side effect of polarization is radicalization, where you're starting to see more of these homegrown terrorists, if you will, because they idolize an extreme base on either side, right? And most people might think, oh, they're probably a Trump supporter and doing this and that. But you got people all the way on the extreme left that might be ODM viral support and doing environmental terrorism, to further their ideals. You got these radicals on both sides, and those bases will continue to grow as the polarization between the two parties continue to grow, and neither of which is good for your average, American citizen. And I think they have to. Well, one, it's going to be almost impossible for Trump to tone down the rhetoric because that's.
Oh, he's not going to do it.
He's not going to do it because he doesn't care. He's a narcissist, right?
And he's won doing it his way. Yeah. There's nothing more dangerous to somebody that's done it their way when it's unconventional and they were successful. At the end of the day, he sits in the Oval Office. Oh, he's not changing a darn thing.
But it's going to be hard. I mean, to have both sides agree is almost like it's like almost like both sides agree to de-arm in a sense of all this extreme rhetoric from both sides. And you know what? It makes money for people. It makes money for Fox News. It makes money for MSNBC. And all the pundits, and they're just screaming, "I can't believe the other side. I can't believe those radical left, and I can't believe those radical right are doing this and this and that." And they're just making you hate your neighbor, right? Which it really shouldn't be. It's really mind-boggling. The left swears that they're all about love and acceptance and yada yada, but they ain't gonna accept somebody who has a conservative view. And the conservative on the other side, most of them are Christian, and Jesus definitely says to love thy neighbor, but if thy neighbor apparently is a liberal, you're supposed to hate his guts, right? So it's really weird that you're seeing both sides hate each other so bad, but if you actually ask them individually what their values and viewpoints are, it doesn't coincide with which the direction of their party's going.
And that's not going to have a pretty ending. If people feel as though our republic, we are a republic, I think it gets lost a lot. You ever said the pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands? We are a republic. Our republic, if people feel as though they cannot have a fair shake at their political ideology using that method, and that could be losing the electoral college again and winning the popular vote. That's not how the presidency's won. That increased polarization, radicalization, while losing elections. That's a bad and ugly recipe, man. That's Civil War type stuff right there. Because people feeling as though they cannot live the life that they want politically, that's what leads people, that pushes them to extreme positions, and that's what gets violence ultimately. And there's absolutely violence and rhetoric on both sides. A lot of people don't like to hear that. A lot of people sound like that's placating, but it's the reality. Where you can have, right-wing minded people march into a state capitol armed to the teeth. Some people find that alarming. There's also a lot of rhetoric out there about eating the rich, and whipping out the guillotines just because Jeff Bezos happens to own the wealthiest company ever created in the history of the world. He happens to be worth I don't know, what's the running counter? $40 trillion again after he already got divorced and had to fork over like 40 trillion. Some people think he should be beheaded for this.
Hey, at some point you have to realize this. There's always going to be the richest person in the world at all times. Mm-hmm. If Jeff Bezos will lose everything he had today, guess what? Whoever's behind him is now the richest person, and they have
used to be Bill Gates. And people couldn't fathom somebody getting more money than Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
Bill Gates still here. Microsoft is still a thing. And then out of nowhere, the rise of Jeff Bezos. So.
And it's one of those things that you can't, one thing we have to, I think, realize is the system we live in, capitalism in itself is not perfect. Every system, if you use somebody to draw it out on your paper, they'll talk about how great and how ideal it is. But no system is perfect without its flaws. And I think once we come to the realization that capitalism is not perfect, and let's try to address these flaws, then maybe we can make some meaningful policy change to help ease some of the tensions from the deficiencies of capitalism. And because essentially capitalism it's a pyramid, right? Mm-hmm. You have
Great
to
pyramid
own.
scheme.
Yeah, it's the ultimate pyramid scheme. You own and build and get people underneath to you to keep building you up, building your company up, so that you rise to the top. It's not taking your wealth and giving it away. It's a pyramid scheme, right? And in any pyramid scheme, as any of y'all know, have any kind of multi-level marketing gimmick that one of your friends try to get you to do, it's only a few people at the top eating. The rest of us are doing all the legwork, all the running around. And any job you go to, if you don't own that job, you're making pennies on the dollar compared to the owner. right? And that's the way things are, right? But the beautiful thing about capitalism on the flip side is that with the right work ethic, chance and luck, and some of the right resources in place, you can also become an owner of your own business, right? So it's a give and take there. So, but what we got to understand is how do we make capitalism the fairest, the most equitable place that we can make a system like that.
We can always work and strive to get better, but the reality is, I don't believe it's capitalism as a system. I'll defend capitalism 8 ways Sunday. No economic system has raised more out of poverty in the history of the world than capitalism. But the reality is, any system that relies on people are imperfect. People are heinous. People are evil. People will absolutely be unethical and trample the village for the sake of $1 extra. But the system itself can always be improved so long as capitalism does not drive the government, and that's what's ultimately happened. These rules and these regulations, as we get a bigger and bigger government, will always benefit those in power, those with money, those who have the money to lobby congressmen and get them and women and get them elected.
Money has infiltrated government to a degree that has never been seen before, and people, I don't think, really realize it. I don't think they understand that most of the people in government on a local, a state, and a federal level have already been bought and paid for in some fashion. I'm, candidate, XYZ. I really want to win out here in Indiana. Well, hey, I'm Monsanto's, and I, really want to put this new pesticide out, and I want to do all these things. And guess what? If you, make sure that I'm taken care of, you'll never have a funding worry in your upcoming candidate race. And that to me shouldn't be, right? At the very least, you should be able to see who's funding these people. And now with the Citizens United, which happened some years back, which was a great travesty, the money can be hidden.
Dark money and super
PACs and all this.
What have you.
That is the worst thing that has happened to politics to me in the last 10, 15 years.
The sad part is the money in politics has always been there. See, yes, through Citizens United and super PACs, we get a lot of dark money in, but we can openly see if you've gotten donations from, prescription drug companies while you come out to vote on a bill that will make billions for prescription drug companies. Like with that, the only thing the dark money even hides at all is the public scrutiny coming behind these things, and that's just amazing to me. You want to talk about bribery? You want to talk about corruption? Emoluments clause. There's a lot of lawsuits about Trump still owning his businesses while being president. Man, isn't it funny how everybody makes their way to Congress, and if you stay long enough, everyone leaves a millionaire? All of them.
This is the richest.
Every last one of them.
This is in any point in history, this is the richest that Congress has ever been. You already have you see these things happening where people are being investigated for making certain financial moves and their personal portfolio based off information that they were privy to during their duties of Congress. And they were able to make or stop the loss of a lot of money, right? They are manipulating the system for their personal gain, which really shouldn't be. And that kind of rolls into term limits. You should not be able to be a career politician and just sit up there in the Senate and the House.
30 years, a lifetime.
To me, if you're there that long and you haven't accomplished your goal, you're a failure. We need somebody else there. We need new blood. But you have these people that are bought and paid for there for years and years and years and decades, and you wonder why things don't change, right? You wonder why it's the same old, because you got the same old people there, right? I don't understand why the presidency has term limits, but why we can't have it for Congress and Senate. And the only way that they're going to do that is they enact it themselves and vote for it themselves, which is something they would never do.
If anything, I think it should be backwards. I think it should be term limits on congressmen, and the president can be as long. Why can't Barack Obama still be president if the man's good at it?
Because the president don't make the laws. People don't realize that. It's back to Schoolhouse Rock. I'm a bill on Capitol Hill. I'm not a bill on at the White House. You go there eventually to get signed and ratified, but the laws happen and Congress. And I don't think people realize that's a lot of power. A lot of power. You know,
And they get entrenched to the point where you don't even have challengers. No one even dares, especially depending on which state you're in. Coming from Maryland, coming from the great Prince George's County, Maryland, but living there, one thing is deep blue, and the nominee is chosen in the Democratic primary. The end. They're running unopposed, and if they are, it's going to be a laugher as they win by a vote of about 90% plus to whatever else on the field. And you get to hold power until you're done with it. Whether you are Mitch McConnell or you're Nancy Pelosi, it doesn't matter. You're going to hold power. I mean, until you drop in office or retire a year or two before you drop. Like they get to hold it all the way. 8 ways to Sunday. In power is what they crave. The money never stops. According to Ballotpedia, by the financial disclosures from 2012 is the most recent one I seem to have up here. But the 113th Congress had a median net worth of $1 million, the first time in history. The majority of members are millionaires. Like, that's insane. You know, that's like Fathom, if you will. We got AOC, and I think it's an excellent story that she is coming from being a bartender and becoming a congresswoman. Because whether you agree with her politics or not, I think the Congress should be made up of the regular people. You should be bartenders. You should be nurses. You should be teachers and doctors and scientists. You should be professions across the board. Should be farmers and etc. and taking a job. But fathom, if you will, there's a story about her not being able to afford, a place to stay when she first showed up in D.C. because how expensive it was. Oh, just give her about 8 years and she's a millionaire. Where is that money coming from? That's crazy.
It's a shame. I mean, and of course, like I said, a lot of this regulation, it falls on Congress to police themselves in a lot of sense, and it's very frustrating when you see a bunch of millionaires arguing back and forth. They know what policies are best for the average guy, or average gal. That they know their constituents. Like, do you? Like, you're vacationing in Martha's Vineyard. Like,
and even
you
worse, for the House of Representatives, you're talking about 2-year cycles. Like, before you figure out, and you're new, before you figure out where the bathrooms are in the Capitol and where your office is in the building, man, you've got to go collect money. You've got to fundraise and get back out there. And at some point, it's more valuable to your reelection to simply have the big plate, big ticket dinners that rakes in tons of cash than it is to knock on doors and meet the common people.
And those big ticket dinners, they come with a lot of favors.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of backdoor deals happening at those dinners that we're not privy to, and it's really shameful. I mean, it really is. I'm all for reducing the amount of money in politics that come from. I feel like people should, if you're going to do it that way, at least be transparent. If you're not going to be transparent, at least have a limit. And have some way that the average person can actually sway the vote. Because a company like, for instance, Coca-Cola has so much money that us as any kind of minor population, let's say of a city, and they want to put a factory there, and they want to demolish a bunch of homes, whether who lives there or not, and they just need the rubber stamp from somebody in the so-and-so congressional district. Well, guess what? They're going to get that because they got the money slinging around, and all those people collectively don't have the money
to install those people. It's interesting. Mayor Mike Bloomberg ran in this Democratic primary, and he got caught in the Freudian slip, in my opinion, on stage when they were asking about what he's done in his challenging him on his record. He talked about the Congress that he bought, he helped get elected, and he literally cut himself off. He meant that. He spent a lot of money across this country buying politicians to get them in office, and he damn sure makes demands on them in those back rooms for those votes and those dollars, because you need the dollars to win, especially when it comes to some of these obscure congressional races. Especially the Senate race. Senate races are alarmingly expensive.
And, this type of stuff. It's not nothing new. I would say that this stuff used to be. It used to have to be hidden more carefully, right? It used to have to be a little bit more finesse to it for your average person not to really know. But now we've been so desensitized to it that they're kind of just almost even out in the open with it. And it's kind of been this way, to be honest, big money, where it comes from, controls the nation. It controls a lot of where the policies are going, who gets in to office, and all these things. And like I said, it's you got to find a way to get some of that money out of politics and get back to what your actual constituents want. If it's really back to what your constituents want, you will see more meaningful changes happening at a micro level, at your local community level. But that's not going to happen because, as Troy alluded to earlier, people are greedy. I mean, people are just greedy. They take and they take and they take. They want more and more and more. They're never satisfied with enough. And that goes all the way to people, in politics. You're going to have your few gems in there, your people who get in and they're really good-hearted, but they're totally outweighed. So,
yeah, that's just the sad reality we have, and that's the state of politics today.